We humans have entered a time in our existence where technology, protected under the blanket of official government secrets, threatened to destroy the world as we know it. I've come to understand the myriad of dots that literally connect every facet of everyday life to the premise that humans can intercept the thoughts of other humans. The process is called remote neural monitoring, and everything that these programs do seems to involve two primary objectives: gain complete control and predictability of human behavior, and know everything about anyone. Hi, my name is Kenneth Peartree, and welcome to part two of the remote neural monitoring series. This information was taken in part from my original video produced in September 2018 called 21st Century Mind Control Programs, Remote Neural Monitoring. In that video, I provided conclusive evidence of the existence of the latest version of mind control programs, described the entire program in considerable detail, and demonstrated how it has affected me and others. This video was over 4 hours long, but every minute was necessary, in my view, because of the sheer scope of these illegal activities. This video, part two, continues the original video's breakdown into subject groups, each in its own separate video. In part one, I described the victim selection process, gang stalking, and the use of directed energy weapons. In part two, electronic weapons and tracking, targeted for remote neural monitoring, I will discuss the system's electronic device to brain connectivity called the electronic brain link, or EBL, as well as the modes and methods used in the weapons systems deployment to harass the victims. I will explain how the perpetrators connect their computer external neural links to the body's neurological systems. I will describe the three parts of the RMS process, which includes connectivity, monitoring, and behavioral influencing. I will introduce you to little known information about how bacteria plays an important role in this technology, and show you how that same essential component can cause serious risks to the environment, human health, and even cause death. Finally, I will show you what I have done to make my life a little more livable. I'm an Air Force veteran of 25 years of service, and I am a VITI, which stands for Victim of Involuntary Technology Interface. I have earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Management, and I have an Associate's of Science degree in Logistics. In addition to DoD Logistics Management training, I have formalized training and certification in quality control, quality assurance, and construction quality management. I listed all of these because collectively, that type of training demonstrates that I have been formally trained to pay attention to details, analyze problems, and discover root causes. I apply each of these skill sets to learning about what they have done to me and others. I am not a scientist or engineer, but because we cannot fix a problem unless we understand what the problem is, as a victim, I'm forced to understand what my government is doing to me and how they are doing it. This video includes first-hand and verifiable data that, when taken in its entirety, almost unequivocally confirms that the United States government is conducting these illegal tests and data collections on large groups of Americans that have been erroneously called targeted individuals. We are not targeted individuals. We are human laboratory animals used in illegal, immoral, and inhumane torture and experimentation into means and methods of monitoring and controlling human behavior. These involve 24/7, 365 surveillance, torture, and elaborate games designed to push the victim to the breaking point while they carefully document every step in that process. This is mind control, not in the sense that most people understand, however. A better way to describe the R&M process might be monitoring, behavior influence, and neurological manipulations. The human mind is just a biological computer where billions of nerve endings throughout the body are all connected to one central processor composed of over 80 billion neurons that collectively we call the human brain. Each brain has its own unique frequency, yet we are otherwise very similar from brain to brain. Each bodily function ranging from involuntary actions such as breathing or voluntary actions such as moving our arms to human emotions such as love, fear, anger, or anxiety all have their uniquely coded frequency and are controlled by their own individual area of the brain. What scientists are racing to do today is to map each of those functions, including the frequencies involved and the area of the brain associated with that activity. Once the frequency associated with an individual task is recorded, it can be played back to the brain in the future, and in the case of motor functions, could potentially be played back to another person. This playback can be demonstrated even using less expensive, almost primitive equipment as compared to the supercomputers currently used in R&M. It can illustrate the ability for technology to control the human body. Here's a good example.
The brain is an amazing and complex organ. And while many people are fascinated by the brain, they can't really tell you that much about the properties about how the brain works because we don't teach neuroscience in schools. And one of the reasons why is that the equipment is so complex and so expensive that it's really only done at major universities and large institutions. And so in order to be able to access the brain, you really need to dedicate your life and spend 6.5 years as a graduate student just to become a neuroscientist to get access to these tools. And that's a shame because 1 out of 5 of us, that's 20% of the entire world, will have a neurological disorder. And there are 0 cures for these diseases. And so it seems that what we should be doing is sort of reaching back earlier in the education process and sort of teaching students about neuroscience, and so that in the future they may be thinking about possibly becoming a brain scientist. And so when I was a graduate student, my lab mate Tim Marzullo and myself decided that, what if we took this complex equipment that we have for studying the brain and made it simple enough and affordable enough that anyone, an amateur or a high school student, could learn and actually participate in the discovery of neuroscience. And so we did just that. A few years ago, we started a company called Backyard Brains, and we make DIY neuroscience equipment. And I brought some here tonight, and I want to do some demonstrations. You guys want to see some? All right. So I need a volunteer. So right before, what is your name? All right, Sam. I'm going to record from your brain. Have you had this before? No. Okay. All right. I need you to stick out your arm for science. Roll up your sleeve a bit. All right. And so what I'm going to do, I'm putting electrodes on your arm, and you're probably wondering, I just said I'm going to record from your brain. What am I doing with your arm? You have about 80 billion neurons inside your brain right now. They're sending electrical messages back and forth and chemical messages. But some of your neurons right here in your motor cortex are going to send messages down when you move your arm like this. It's going to go down across your corpus callosum, down onto your spinal cord, your lower motor neuron, out to your muscles here. And that is electrical discharge. It's going to be picked up by these electrodes right here. And we're going to be able to listen to exactly what your brain is going to be doing. So I'm going to turn this on for a second. Have you ever heard what your brain sounds like? All right, let's turn it on. So go ahead, go ahead and squeeze your hand. All right, so what you're listening to, so this is your motor units that are happening right here. Okay, so let's take a look at it as well. So I'm going to stand over here, and I'm going to open up our app here. So now I want you to squeeze. Yeah, so right here, these are the motor units that are happening from her spinal cord out to her muscle right here. And as she's doing it, you're seeing the electrical activity that's happening here. We can even click here and try to see one of them. So keep doing it really, really hard. Yeah, so now we've paused on one motor action potential that's happening right now inside of your brain. Okay, do you guys want to see some more? All right. That's interesting, but let's get it better. Okay, I need one more volunteer. Okay, what is your name, sir? Miguel, all right. You're going to stand right here. So Miguel, when you're moving your arm like this, your brain is sending a signal down to your muscles right here. I want you to move your arm as well. All right, so your brain is going to send a signal down to your muscles. And so it turns out that there is a nerve that's right here that runs up here that innervates these three fingers. And it's close enough to the skin that we might be able to stimulate that. So that we can do is copy your brain signal that's going out to your hand and inject it into your hand so that your hand will move when your brain tells your hand to move. And so in a sense, she will take away your free will and you will no longer have any control over this hand, okay? You with me? All right, so I just need to hook you up. All right, so I'm going to find your ulnar nerve, which is probably right around here. You don't know what you're signing up for when you come up and... So now I'm going to move away and I'm going to plug it into our human-to-human interface over here. Okay, so Sam wants you to squeeze your hand again. All right, do it again. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to hook you up over here so that you get this. It's going to feel a little bit weird at first. This is going to feel like a, when you lose your free will and someone else becomes your agent, it does feel a bit strange. So I want you to relax your hand. All right, and Sam, you're with me? All right, so you're gonna squeeze. I'm not going to turn it on yet, so go ahead and give it a squeeze. All right, so now, are you ready, Miguel?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so I've turned it on. So go ahead and turn your hand. Do you feel that a little bit?
Nope.
Okay, do it again.
Nope. A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so relax. No, hit it again. Okay. Oh, perfect. Perfect. All right, so relax. Do it again. All right, so now. All right, so right now, your brain is controlling your arm and it's also controlling his arm. So go ahead and just do it one more time. All right, so that's perfect. So now, what would happen if I took over my control of your hand, and so just relax your hand, what happens? Nothing. Why not? Because the brain has to do it. Now you do it again. All right, that's perfect. All right, well, thank you guys for being such a good sport. This is what's happening all across the world, electrophysiology, and we're going to bring on the neuro revolution. Thank you.
The difference in this demonstration and the controls inherent in the R&M process is that this demonstration was based on external stimulation of nerves, where R&M manipulates body functions internally from the brain outward. Much of this information was extracted from various documents available online, such as information from evidence presented in the lawsuit John St. Clair Acqui versus NSA, Fort Meade, Maryland, Dr. Robert Duncan, and others, as well as patents information that I have studied and reviewed over recent years. Unfortunately, we must now get a bit technical. Remote neural monitoring, or R&M, is the ability to monitor the human brain without the need for bulky external attached devices that have become common in online comments about mind control. Research studies have shown that the human brain processes information quickly, creating a data stream at speeds of about 5 kilobits per second. Monitoring the data stream, which is naturally emitted from the human brain, does not come close to challenging the capabilities of RNN systems comprised of supercomputers connected via satellites, implants, and biotelemetry. The human brain has a characteristic set of bioelectric resonance structure. By using supercomputers, the RNM system can hone in on it and send messages through an individual's nervous system. It is widely reported that at the present,
Around the world, supercomputers are watching millions of people at the same time with the speed of 20 terabytes per second. How does R&M work? It employs a set of programs function at different levels. The signals intelligence systems, which applies electromagnetic frequencies, EMF, to excite the brain for the system, and the electronic brain link, or EBL. The brain simulation system was originally presented to American lawmakers as particle emissions intelligence system, which means receiving information from unintentionally created electromagnetic waves in the environment. The recording machines have electronic equipment to examine electrical actions in human beings from a distance. This computer-generated brain charting system can record all electrical events in the cerebrum. The recording aid system deciphers individual brain maps for security and identification purposes. The underlying technology of this system takes into consideration that the electrical activity in the speech center of the brain can be translated into the subject's verbal thoughts. R&M can send encrypted signals to the audio cortex of the brain directly, circumventing the ear. This encoding assists in detecting audio communication. It can also perform electrical mapping of the cerebrum's activity from the visual center, which is achieved by avoiding the eyes and optic nerves, consequently projecting images from the subject's mind into a video display. After collecting this visual and audio memory, both can be visualized and analyzed. The machinery involved can remotely and non-evasively detect information by digitally encoding the evoked potentials in 30 to 50 hertz, 5 milliwatts electromagnetic emissions from the cerebrum. Evoked potentials are the spikes and patterns created by the nerves as they produce shifting electrical patterns with the ever-changing magnetic instability, which then puts on a constant amount of electromagnetic waves. The interesting part about this is that the entire exercise is carried out without any physical contact to the subject. The EMF emissions can be decoded into current thoughts and audio-visual perceptions in the subject's mind at any given time. It sends complicated ciphers and electromagnetic pulse signals to activate evoked potentials inside the mind, consequently generating sound and visual input in the neural circuits. With its speech, auditory, and visual communication arrays, R&M allows for a comprehensive audio-visual mind-to-mind connection, or a mind-to-computer association. Reports of harassment tactics such as dream manipulations most likely is rooted in this process. Complaints of thought, suggestions, and dreams that do not appear to originate in the victim's mind are likely generated through this process.
Once the process of remote neuromonitoring records a particular action generated by the Vitae's normal daily activity, that function is a record of the exact set of frequencies for that feeling, emotion, or movement in that person. R&M is a bidirectional communication system, a process called the feedback loop. Information received about neural activity can be replayed back to the same brain, making those signals indistinguishable to the Vitae. That is how they can do such insidious things as causing sexual arousal at any time for no apparent reason in the victim's mind. Raw emotions such as anger can be input into the Vitae's brain, causing anger in situations where otherwise no anger would have been involved. Emotions such as anxiety, depression, despair, rage, or lust can all be dialed up at the whim of the handler's input or presets in the supercomputer's algorithms. Victims can perhaps control those artificially generated emotions in the same way that we control our own natural human emotions. However, If the vitae is compromised in any way, such as under the influence of alcohol or some drug, the ability to control or manage those imposed emotions may be too much for some victims. Add the scripted and planned antagonistic actions of the perpetrators, and these confusion emotions can be too much for some. It is the perfect process for covert action, providing nearly 100% plausible deniability for the assailant when the victim accuses them of that crime. In part one, I touched on plausible deniability, but it's worth mentioning again because plausible deniability is so important to this program. Plausible deniability, you may recall, means the possibility of denying a fact, especially in a discreditable action, without arousing suspicion. Simply stated, it is the ability to say, we did not do this or that, when in actuality they did, and the victim can't prove it. The method of achieving these goals is one of the most important components of these illegal programs. The covert means for each of the tactics against victims is firmly rooted in plausible deniability. R&M connects hundreds, perhaps thousands or more unwilling and unwitting citizens to its network of brain-to-computer interface systems, which provide 24/7, 365 visibility of the thoughts, words, and actions of human assets in real time. Using nanotechnology and subdermal implantation, this system connects the human host to a highly sophisticated network, which includes multiple modes of connectivity, such as cellular networks and the internet and orbital communication satellites, to provide connectivity to the human host to supercomputing networks in real time at speeds that are faster than the neurological processing power of the human brain. Although some may argue that today's victims are not chipped, meaning implanted with a subdermal electronic device, I know for a fact that some vitae are, because I speak from firsthand empirical and verifiable data that I am chipped in multiple locations on my body. This fact and this program are protected from public scrutiny by a complex web of lies, disinformation, and propaganda designed to convince victims that they are not chipped, saying instead implantation is not necessary today, while it is possible that some victims may not be implanted with subdermal electronic devices, and to a certain degree it may not be necessary for their systems to read our thoughts or to monitor all neurological, respiratory, and other bodily functions. However, the effectiveness of these monitoring processes are likely dramatically degraded as the distance between the signal inceptor apparatuses and the victim's physical body increases, a fact illustrated in this DARPA contract solicitation. What this tells us is that even with the use of sophisticated instruments such as micro-impulse radar and ultra-wideband technologies, they have the capability of detecting heartbeat and respiration at distances up to 8 meters, but are limited at greater distances and in challenging environments such as penetrating through thick or multiple walls, concrete, and RF noisy environments. On a personal note, think about why the 5G networks are coming.
With us this hour is Joe Imbriano. He is a man who has become very much concerned with all of our well-being, our welfare. His YouTube channel is the Fullerton Informer, so by all means look for that, the Fullerton Informer. His blog, he's got two of them, the FullertonInformer.com and the WiFiDanger.com. Those are both blogs, and Joe is there. He's available, and he was kind enough to join us tonight. 5G, Joe, how much worse than 4G is 5G?
Well, thank you for having me on,
You bet.
Jeff, and nice to talk to everybody out there listening. It's a great question, and you know, when any time they roll something out that's a weapon, the first thing they do is get you used to it in a more innocuous form. And the current technology that's out there now is dangerous. It does cause cancer. The current cellular technology that's been deployed is not nearly as problematic as the 5G. And when we talk about 5G, that really stands for fifth generation wireless. What that refers to is a new spectrum of broadcast that's been opened up by the FCC. There is more of the spectrum higher up in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the millimeter wave band of the electromagnetic spectrum. And they're different electromagnetic waves, in a sense, than what we're currently being exposed to with the current GSM technology.
Although these are not necessarily the systems used in R&M, but using logical deductions, one could expect that detection of naturally emitted electromagnetic frequencies from the human body are also limited by distance without the aid of subdermal receivers and bidirectional nanotechnology-based antennas that cover what I believe may be virtually all vitized bodies. More on that also in a moment. The use of implants allows operators greater reception and transmission ability to control and direct frequencies to the motor or nerve centers of their choosing. Simply stated, surface and implanted microtransceivers makes our bodies more accessible to their Wi-Fi, smart energy, and satellite systems transmissions. I mentioned earlier that I speak from firsthand empirical and verifiable data that I am chipped in multiple locations on my body. This is the principal reason why I believe that nearly all vitites are chipped. Additionally, in my case, the subdermal microtransceivers are implanted in my body without my knowledge or consent during medical procedures carried out in the military and Veterans Administration's medical facilities, one of which can be made visible under the skin by pinching the area, providing me with 100% proof of the foreign implant. I have at least 3 that I can identify, but highly likely 4, 2 of which can be made visible under the skin. The 4th, the base of the head, is almost certain, but I cannot touch it as I can the other 3. Here is one of them from a video taken when I positively identified it for the first time. I am 100% certain that there is an object below my skin. What that object is, I don't know. But there's 100% certain that there's an object there because I can feel it and it moves. Just see that point right there? That's it. That's the end of it sticking up. See it move up? See that? That's it. That's the best representation I've had of it. It's covered now with material that makes it look larger, but it's not really that large because when I press on it, I can feel the size of it. That is it right there. That is the best representation I've had of it. You can see it moving up each time I press up on my finger. Bingo. That's it. That is it. There it is. Finally. I thought there must have been a way to do that. You can see the point of it just here. Watch this. See it? There it is. There it is. And that came from this surgery when it was installed. The average John or Jane public has heard about remote brain-to-device interface, but likely has not stopped to take stock in its implications. For example, in this video, Dr. Regina Dugan, former director of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, who later held positions as VP of Engineering Advanced Technology Projects at Google, and is serving as the current head of the Research and Development Unit at Facebook with the title of Vice President, Building 8 of Facebook. Talk about we don't want you to know what we're doing names. I digress. Said that she wanted to connect the human brain to software to give Facebook users, quote,
a silent speech interface, one with all the speed and flexibility of voice, but with the privacy of typed text. Better yet, with the ability to text a friend without taking out your phone, or to send a quick email without missing the party. No more false choices. The electrodes record her neurons firing when she imagines moving the cursor. Then the computer learns to move it for her. Using this system, she can type 8 words per minute. She is typing at 8 words per minute directly with her brain. Now that's less than 1/3 the speed that you can type on a smartphone, but it is lightning fast compared to silence. So what if instead of using imagined arm movements, we could decode speech directly? Now, to be clear, we are not talking about decoding your random thoughts. That might be more than any of us care to know. And it's not something any of us should have a right to know. Think of it more like this. You take many photos, you choose to share some of them. Similarly, you have many thoughts. You choose to share some of them. We're talking about decoding those words, the ones you've already decided to share, by sending them to the speech center of your brain.
I trust that if I give Facebook access to read my mind, they would only read my mind when I want them to. Don't you? The understanding of the human brain has advanced considerably since the U.S. Brain Initiative set out to decode it.
And we're here this afternoon to take your questions on Twitter about an exciting announcement that the President made this morning to launch a $100 million BRAIN initiative, which stands for Brain Research through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. You think about what we could learn about designing future information and communications technologies by understanding how the human brain works. So here to tell us a little bit about what their agency will be doing to advance the President's BRAIN initiative is Arthi Prabhakar, Director of DARPA.
It's great to be here with both of you today. DARPA is participating in this initiative out of a view that what is happening today in the biological sciences and the new research in brain technology.
The new research in brain technology.
The new research in brain technology, brain understanding, is really opening a window that we think is going to lead to some amazing and powerful capabilities ahead.
The network that connects the involuntary implanted subdermal electronic devices that I showed earlier has the capability to monitor my body's neurological processes and function almost any place that there is electricity or the internet. In my case, evidence suggests the use of nanotechnologies with remote neural connectivity via multiple interfaces, including Wi-Fi, smart energy, which is electricity delivered via smart meter, and microwave. I mentioned earlier that I have possibly 4 chips in my body, and some of you may have wondered how I can detect the effects of these devices. Back before I understood the technology, I suffered from constant neurological attacks, especially if I worked out to try to keep my body and mind in good health. Exercise is very important to both. That means that exercise is the enemy of these programs, and they tried hard to prevent me from even joining a gym. After a workout, sometimes many minutes after stopping, they would elevate my heart rate. I know that many Vitites have experienced this unexplained racing heart rate. In my case, it was a scare tactic to keep me from going to the gym. Then one day I decided to try an experiment, deciding to stay away from areas with Wi-Fi signals after working out, which included my car, because many new cars have integrated Wi-Fi. On that day after my workout, I did not have any increased heart rate. I did it again and again with the same results. Deductive reasoning told me that the first place to look would be the most common area used to control the brain, the base of the neck and behind the ears. The one ideal way to implant is to do it during a routine procedure. Those two important considerations aligned in one spot for me. This long scar was from a surgery on the bone at the base of my skull, a procedure carried out around 1995 or so. But the other was from a routine procedure to remove a cyst in 2008 or 2009. That was around the same time that some of the small overt actions began. So that was my first guess to look for the implant. I could not feel it, however, but I decided to try to deactivate it because I was convinced that it was there. I purchased a strong rare earth magnet and taped it to the back of my neck above the spot. I wore it for several hours, but nothing happened that I could tell. I decided to try again when I could leave it on for an entire day. On the second attempt, after around 10 hours, I started to feel my heart rate go up and down. I was concerned, but I was determined not to stop for 24 hours. After about an hour of these fluctuations, I felt increased changes in rapidly increased heart rate, followed by quickly returning to normal. Then the altered heart rate stopped and returned to a steady normal. I slept with the magnet on my neck all night to complete the 24-hour period, then removed it. The elevated heart rate, for no reason, never happened again, and that was more than a year ago. That is why I say I cannot be sure that I have a device on my neck, but I believe that it's there, and I think I deactivated it. The device in my arms seems to control motor nerves in the arms, but I have been unsuccessful at deactivating it, although I tried the same procedure. How do I know what this implant does? This is why. These are muscle twitches I get in both arms. They start when I'm doing something that they do not like making this video. As soon as I start, I am attacked. If I post things they don't like, these twitches start. Sometimes they do this as I go to bed as another of their sleep deprivation tools. Microwave and other electronic harassments can be much worse than the annoying muscle twitches like these. Microwave and radio frequency attacks can be almost debilitating. The little known fact mentioned earlier is that these processes are made possible using nanolace biofilm bacteria, which attaches itself to the skin. Nanoparticle transceivers that are embedded in the sticky bacteria, securing themselves to the body's exterior. As a result, the entire surface of the victim's body becomes an antenna, which is why victims report being attacked in crowded rooms with seemingly no effect on anyone around us. Individuals who do not have these bacterial-laced and activated transceivers are not equipped to efficiently receive the transmissions, while VITIs sense every emission with sometimes painful consequences. The nanoparticle laced bacteria that covers our bodies is delivered in the water that we use to bathe and drink. Some suggest that these nanoparticles are activated by microwave energy, possibly of a specific frequency, which may be how inactive nanoparticles on other citizens could be left dormant until needed, yet be activated instantly with perhaps a brief period of low-level microwave energy exposure, and thus provide instant access to any person with these nanomaterials on their skin or in their bodies. Is this one of the ways that citizens with no relations to this program sometimes act in ways that give the impression that they are perps? Doing things like acting aggressively towards the vitae for no apparent reason? This is an open question. I am certain that these bacterial delivery systems is in use, and I now even know when they were first used on me. It was in the early 1980s or thereabouts. I know because I began to suffer chronic urinary tract infections and other symptoms of bacterial type infections. Since that time, many, if not all, the sexual partners I've had experienced a higher than normal bouts of yeast infections, which are very commonly caused by bacteria. I was diagnosed with an enlarged prostate in my early 30s, which is not super uncommon, but knowing what I know now, I don't even think that that was the issue specifically of the prostate. I believe that I was suffering from bacteria-based biofilm exposure in my entire urinary tract. I saw at least a half dozen specialists, and none of them had the answer, so they said. They said that they did not know why I was having the problems. Everything is clear to me now that I know about biofilm bacteria-laced nanoparticle materials. These materials on the skin can cause all sorts of problems, from skin abrasions to redness to sores and chronic skin cracking and drying. Small bumps, scratches, or sores may not heal as quickly as they used to. Larger sores can easily become chronic sores because of the constant exposure to bacteria. You may find that affected areas are areas that are most often uncovered by clothing or covered by thin material. Feet, the neck, face, and arms are highly likely areas that are affected. Women who wear shorts or skirts in the home may have skin problems on their legs below the normally covered areas of their body. Even though these are areas that would also be exposed to the sun, the problems likely have little to do with the sun. It is exposure to bacteria-laced nanoparticles and microwave energy used to keep these nanoparticles charged. I believe that the energy needed to energize the entire body, including areas through the clothes, overexposes areas that are not covered, causing these sores to not heal properly. Another huge side effect of having bacteria in our water is the way it attaches itself to everything, including the inside of the body and even inside of our ears. Many vitis, including me, have tinnitus, which is the technical term for ringing in the ear. This is a very little understood problem by most of us, but one of the causes is damage to the fine hair-like receptors inside the inner ear. This infographic explains it well. Microscopic hairs form a fringe on the surface of each auditory cell in the cornea. If hairs are damaged, they may move randomly, sending electrical impulses to the brain as noise or tinnitus, unquote. Simple problems such as earwax buildup can also cause problems. However, in the case of vitis, contact with water laced with biofilm bacteria can cause problems that can be particularly difficult to eradicate.
So this is the update about my ear infection. It's, I think, like 3 months now. It started before that fevers of October 16th, which lasted until I got good antibiotics.
Biofilm bacteria sticks to everything on the body. These tiny hairs are an obvious target. Ear infections and tinnitus are common problems for many, if not most of us. Victims may find that their ears stop producing earwax. That is because the tiny pores that secrete this protective fluid become clogged with biofilm bacteria. My ears would constantly become wet at night, then stop once the head was away from the pillow. You may notice that near the opening of the ear, it may have dry and flaky material from irritated skin around the outer ear. Pain, however, may be the first obvious sign that you have an infection, and when that happens, you won't be able to ignore it. I use a simple solution of warm distilled water and hydrogen peroxide to alleviate my ear infection before it became severe. The pain stopped very quickly. However, I've had tinnitus since the mid-1980s and have suffered substantial hearing loss, neither of which doctors could explain, both of which are obvious now. In Florida, red tide has been increasing every year. Red tide is caused by bacteria. Is there a connection between red tide and the millions of gallons of bacteria-laced nanoparticles ending up in the ocean through groundwater runoff from Vitais or adjacent citizens watering their grass, washing their cars, or other activities where water goes into the storm water treatment process that are not designed to destroy bacteria as it is done in sewage and other household waste discharges? During natural emergencies, when untreated sewage is leaked into the environment, it would also contain the same bacteria. Logic says that we need to know more about the extent of this problem. Here's an explanation of how biofilms work.
I think there's an increasing recognition that biofilms play a role in chronic diseases. And the reason for that is that biofilms are very difficult to eradicate. They live on surfaces. They produce extracellular materials that can defend themselves against human immune cells or antibiotics. And therefore, they're very difficult to remove. And once they form on a surface, they're very difficult for your body or for drugs to kill them.
We have done studies in which we have grown biofilms and then tried to add, penicillin, gentamicin, some standard type antibacterial agent, and we're not seeing it do anything.
Examples of this can include infections of bone, infections of your heart valves, infection of the urinary tract, in which bacteria can colonize these surfaces in the human body and live there for long periods of time.
Now, what we know about these communities is that it takes such a greater concentration of antibiotic to get rid of them that it is not indicated. You're talking about anywhere from 500 to 5,000 times the concentration that normally is the minimum inhibitory concentration of antibiotic that it takes to kill bacteria in a biofilm.
The life cycle begins when bacteria enter the bloodstream from various infection routes and evade the immune system or antibiotics. Formation begins with attachment of planktonic bacteria to the surface, preconditioned with proteins from the host immune system. Irreversible attachment to host proteins signals the bacteria to create biofilm and is the first committed step of biofilm growth. The bacteria anchor themselves permanently using cell adhesion structures such as pili and receptors called epitopes. This encourages new bacteria to attach to newly arriving cells, providing adhesion sites and building the protective matrix of the biofilm structure. Cells now communicate via quorum sensing and use small molecules to regulate gene expression within the bacterium. The community grows through both cell division and recruitment. The development of this complex biofilm makes the community resistant to the immune response and antibiotics. It may include diverse species of bacteria, yeasts, minerals, and host proteins.
I'm trained as a PhD in microbiology, and I work with a number of medical teams. The one that I work with here predominantly is the orthopedic surgery team of Allegheny General Hospital. And they are my direct employers, but I'm associated with the Center for Genomic Sciences, which is part of Allegheny Singer Research Institute, which is a really red-hot research institute associated with the Allegheny General Hospital. We gave up on analyzing water and soil populations using cultures in the late 1970s, early 80s. So cultures are only used in the medical side. And now we realize that cultures are just not very good at picking up biofilm infections, and particularly in orthopedics, where I'm working, and you get an infected knee or you get an infected hip, it runs culture negative all the time, and the surgeons will just treat it like an infection, treat it with antibiotics, but the nuisance of it being culture negative is really bad, because you don't know which bacteria you're dealing with, and you don't know which antibiotics to use. So we're now crystallizing a new method of looking at bacterial infections in orthopedics using quite different techniques. We're out of the culture era. A great many gentlemen my age will be affected by prostatitis. They'll live with it for the rest of their lives. They'll get intermittent antibiotic therapy for the acute episodes, but they've got a biofilm in their prostate. And we really can't quite convince even the medical people in the area yet that it's a biofilm disease and we should be treated in a biofilm way. And the biofilm way is big doses of antibiotics, very consistently, and sometimes even the removal of the organ prophylactically to stop the infection, because biofilms really can't be treated with little doses of antibiotic. They have to be dug out. When you have a cancer, you have a body of the cancer and you have metastasis. That is, little pieces of the cancer will go somewhere else and start to grow. And this is exactly the problem we have with biofilm infections. For example, if you have a biofilm endocarditis, it can seed into your lungs, it can seed into your brain, and it can produce all kinds of little biofilms that jam in your capillary beds and cause stroke and cause pneumonia in the lung. So basically a biofilm infection is something that's seated somewhere, just like a cancer, and like the cancer metastasizes to different area, the biofilm also spreads to different areas, and we can have a strategy that stops that spread. And in fact, you use antibiotics to stop single bacteria from migrating somewhere and setting up a new biofilm. So exact parallel between biofilms and cancer.
I was diagnosed with septicemia in 2006, a very deadly ailment. The important thing to note is that septicemia is almost always related to some form of immune system deficiency, intravenous drug use, or an illness that required medical treatment. I had none of them. In fact, I have never done drugs. At that point, I had only been in the hospital twice for medical testing and surgery in my life, never for treatment of an illness. Moreover, most would see my immune system as extraordinary because I have not had even a common cold since 1984. I remember the year because I had what was diagnosed as walking pneumonia that year, was given some antibiotics and directed to stay home for a few days. Since that day, I have not had another cold, when prior to that I had a small cold about once a year or so. How could it be that a man with a strong immune system contracted this disorder? Doctors were puzzled as well, and during my week in the hospital, I was visited by teams of doctors and had around a dozen tests. Even the Center for Disease Control, CDC, sent doctors to ask me questions. Following my hospital visit, I had to wear an intravenous antibiotic drip bag for another 3 weeks. I now fully understand that the endless barrage of biofilms that I had ingested had finally released their bacterial spores that clogged the lymphatic glands at the top of my leg, causing the bacteria to bypass the filtration process, thereby entering my bloodstream. The pain and swelling I experienced associated with that gland, according to my doctors, identified it as a likely entry point, but they said that they did not know how or why the bacteria got to that gland. Today it is clear to me. I drank it in the tap water in my home, something I did regularly in 2006. I had experienced chronically recurring urinary tract ailments and prostatitis by the age 30, all symptomatic of ingesting these toxins over decades of my life. Septicemia is a potentially deadly illness.
I could have died or suffered irreparable damage to organs or other areas of my body had I not acted immediately. At the onset of the symptoms, I had no idea what was wrong, just that I never normally felt ill. I was ill, very sick, with a rapid onset fever. At first check, 101. I went out to buy a few things, hoping to feel better, then checked it 45 minutes later, and it was 103. I immediately packed some clothes and drove to the VA emergency room, expecting to be admitted to the hospital. This was a 7-turn, approximately 22-mile major road drive that I had taken several times in the past, yet I made several wrong turns on the way. Mental confusion had set in. They ran blood tests and x-rays. Unable to figure it out, they sent me home with antibiotics, which made me feel better. The next day, Sunday, I got a call asking me to return to the hospital for more tests. I said that I could come by on Monday after setting up my job site, but they said, we kind of need you to come back as soon as possible to be admitted. That was shocking. I now understand that had I laid down hoping to feel better when I felt ill that day, perhaps I would not have survived. Septicemia can be deadly. I was lucky to have health insurance. Someone without health insurance perhaps would have taken the rest approach first. That would have likely ended their life. So what do I do to help with the problem of biofilm bacteria on my skin? It is virtually impossible to avoid bacteria present in our main water supply. We can only understand that it's there and avoid consuming it. Never, ever drink the tap water in your home. Even if you boil it, it is not safe because it still may contain nanoparticles. We have to use the water to bathe, however. I remove the bacteria from my body and then take steps to prevent it from forming or growing on my skin. I'm not recommending the process to anyone. I'm simply sharing how I remove the bacteria from my body. Some of the materials I use are harmful to human health and must be properly handled to avoid additional risk to your health. I have studied the hazards of these materials and feel comfortable with my ability to safely use them. I use a combination of distilled water, Dawn dishwashing liquid, and chlorine bleach to make a liquid soap that I use to bathe. I use 1/2 cup of chlorine bleach, 1/4 cup of Dawn or similar grease cutting dish detergent, and 3 cups of distilled water for a 6-to-1 ratio of bleach to water to prevent the excessive irritation and drying, but still be effective. I experimented with much less bleach to start until I was comfortable with how my skin will react to the chlorine. Internally ingesting bleach will cause severe injury or death. And this mixture will cause serious problems if you get it in your eyes. I make sure that I never get it near my mouth or splash it in my face. Once all these parts are completely mixed, I first wet myself and this exfoliating cloth, then turn off the water. I then put a generous amount of the soap mixture all over my body and on this cloth as well, and wash my entire body. I use a large spray bottle to put it on my body, keeping it close to me to make sure the spray does not become airborne. I prefer to scrub myself with the water off because I don't want to wash away the cleansing power of the soap mixture immediately, using firm pressure to wash my entire body. After every area scrubbed, I rinse thoroughly in the shower. The first time I saw the water during the rinse, I was shocked because of the black material that was removed. That was not skin for folks who are thinking that. It was bacteria, just like this on the toilet, that can still grow, but very slowly and not secure to the body, which is why I use baby oil. Chlorine can dry skin and it should never be used on the hair on your head, but it kills the bacteria and helps to remove it. Just remember that you are rinsing off in the same bacteria-laced water. I dry myself, then immediately apply baby oil to every inch of my body except my hair. This product either kills or inhibits the growth of bacteria that is deposited on the body during rinsing, helps to prevent it from attaching to the skin, and helps with dryness. I immediately noticed the difference in the level of emissions I felt inside where I stay. It was a life changer for me. I now use warm or hot water to wash my clothes. It takes a little more soap to wash clothes because naturally some of the baby oil comes into contact with the clothes, but I have never seen it. I suspect that it's there because I noticed the increased amount of soap needed to wash the clothes.
Sleep deprivation is one of the pillars of this program. The lack of sleep weakens the victim in all the right ways that these perpetrators need them weakened to fit the program's central goals. Medical experts report that a lack of sleep can trigger mania in people who have manic depression. Other psychological risks include impulsive behavior, depression, paranoia, and suicidal thoughts, a virtual smorgasbord of delectable symptoms for the perpetrators. That is likely the reason why sleep depravity is relentless against vitize. Remote access to victims' neurological systems is most complete during the unconscious hours of sleep, providing the perpetrators nearly unrelenting control of vital body functions such as heart rate, regulation of body temperature, and even muscle control. Dream manipulation is a favorite as well. I purchased this sleep monitoring device, and the results of my first couple of studies were a rude awakening to me, no pun intended. I had often been awakened by a rapid heart rate and thought it must have been a dream, but I would not have recalled a dream. Then I got these results. Here are my words about what I discovered. I am bringing this up to demonstrate the sleep deprivation portion of this targeting. One of the things they do is to prevent your body from getting proper rest by preventing it from going into its deep REM sleep. And they keep the heart rate up during almost the entire sleep cycle. We're going to start with this file, the 12 August file, because it's the most stark. USB 12 August. I'm going to move this out of the way for a minute. It's still open, just on a different screen. And this is, let's go to the summary report first. Look at this. My average heart rate is 81.1. This is while I'm sleeping. Average heart rate of 81.1. You see it drop down to 47, which is normal when you're sleeping, for it to slow down very slow when you're sleeping. But they won't allow it to stay that way. Oops. Kill that. So now if I go to the strip chart, and this is where it really gets interesting. I wonder if I can't make this much smaller. But what this does is allow you to select different times to be able to see this. So this is started at 2:20 a.m. and
if you look at my heart rate at 315 was 88 beats per second. There it is right there. You can follow along with that. I'm just going to move this along. Oops. Just going to hit various points. Look at that, 91. Look at this one, 98 beats per second. 98. It dropped down here to 86 and went right back up. Looks like I settled in here, but they won't allow it to stay that way. It went back up to, it went from 73 within seconds back up to 88. Here's another big spike. This could have been a movement of some type. I could have shifted in bed and caused it to give a little bit of a spike. But when they're consistent like this, there's no doubt in it. 93. These are all. Even here when they were low, 81. It bottomed out at 71. That's, I'm supposed to be sleeping now. At no point during this night did I get any measure of rest. It dropped down to 52 here, which was me going into my REM sleep, and they spike it right back up, 84. This is truly disturbing. This entire period, this is the 80 mark. The 80 mark runs right across here, and you can see this entire period is hovering right around the 80 mark when I'm supposed to be sleeping. That's supposed to be rest. This was by far the worst one. This was the first one that I actually saved to my computer, and this is the first one I looked at. I saved a couple of them and I didn't go through them. Oops. Let's look at the other one that I saved. It's not as bad, but it's similar. Let's look at 8 August. As you can see, both of these were transferred onto the computer at the same time. The date modified, that's just the date that they were put onto the computer. That's all that was. Now, this will give you a better picture on what it should be and the way it's being manipulated. This is after I started quite late here, 3:19. I mean, I'm a night owl. As you can see, the oxygen in my blood is perfect. It's fine. It's around 90. It drops a couple times, but it's very good. There's no problems there. Look at this. This is where it should be. So from 3:37 to 3:42, I got a little rest, and then they bumped it up. It went to 75. So I was going in and out of this REM sleep. This is at least I was getting some rest here. 58. Now watch this. It climbs right back up again. 87. Topping out here at 90. 77. 80. 81. 83. Try to get some rest again, and it spikes back up. Now this is what my REM sleep should look like. This is when you're resting. And I only got this rest between 3:35 and 3:53, for instance. And then look at this. Absolutely steady, elevated. Oops. There we go. 82, 84, 81, tiny drop here to 66, but then right back up, spiked back up to 82. This is not normal. If I go to this report and look at my summary, you can see my average pulse in this study is 74. My average pulse when I'm sleeping, even on this one of the better ones, my average pulse when I'm sleeping is higher than my normal resting pulse rate. It's not right. As I explained earlier in what may have been somewhat confusing terms, I will provide more tangible insight to now. Electromagnetic weapons are evil on an unimaginable level. This is a scientific gift that has been turned into the ultimate torture weapon.
Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
And untraceable, and for most undetectable emission that causes real harm to the victim. Undetectable for most, but I have found ways to detect the emissions. Sometimes an AM radio tuned to a dead spot with little or no static can be a very effective emissions detector to help locate the source of high microwave energy fields. Ask any Vitae, and they will tell you that their bed is their own customized torture chamber. It is true. It is the one place that these perpetrators know that the victim cannot run from. We can move it, but we must always have a place to sleep, and no place is safe from the ultimate power.
Magnetic fluxes. See that big jump? It's at night. You see a steel centered around this bed. Top side. Look at that. 100 at the bed. Fairly constant 20. Just to back the phone away to see that it's not the phone. See, jump to 100. Back down. It's very clear where the signal's coming from and where it's positioned. Directly over the bed. The other area, you notice when I get here, the signal disappears. Watch this. So where I sit and where I sleep.
Remote neuromonitoring is one of the cornerstones for control and domination of all Americans, perhaps all humans. Mr. Peter Phelps, Lou Brown, and Bridget Thornton from Sonoma State University, who published a research document in December 2006 entitled U.S. Electromagnetic Weapons and Human Rights, a study of the history of U.S. intelligence community, human rights violation, and continuing research in electromagnetic weapons, described the huge problems facing our nation. In their document, they said that their research, quote, explored the current capabilities of the U.S. military to use electromagnetic EMF devices to harass, intimidate, and kill individuals, and the continuing possibilities of violations of human rights by the testing and deployment of these weapons, unquote. Although EMF and brain research may have started out or been sold to the American people as they are currently being used, as former President George H.W. Bush did in the 1990s with his declaration of the Decade of the Brain, or former President Barack Obama's Brain Initiative, there are enormous benefits that could be derived for the American people. However, as Phillips, Brown, and Thornton described in their paper, quote, a medical engineer, Eldon Berg, reported a case that illustrates this point. After working on the Polaris submarine, which carried a long-range nuclear weapon, Berg developed a non-lethal weapon with reversible effects. He regarded this as a humanitarian alternative to punching holes in people and having their blood leak out in battle. His invention used magnetic fields at biologically active wave frequencies to affect brain functions. Berg could put animals to sleep at a distance and influence their movements, unquote. To many Vitae, this may all sound very familiar. They went on to say, quote, when the success of his research became evident, suddenly he was pulled off of the project and it went black. He believes the electromagnetic resonance weapon he developed have been used for psychological control of civilians rather than the exigencies of battle. That is, to ensure his participation. He was uninformed about the true nature of the project. Berg's case also illustrates how morally tolerable operations may transition to morally intolerable operations, or at least rise above the atrocity line, unquote. Berg's case of a research project being transformed into a weapon is a perfect illustration of where we are today. Yet this realization becomes a bit less disturbing when we consider that the egregious acts against us in the remote neural monitoring program changed after discovering what the technology can do. The alternative represents a situation where these weapons and acts against victims of involuntary technology interface were what was planned from the beginning. Both are horrible, but the latter is the most unthinkable of these two evils. Thanks for watching.